begin our meeting with a blessing from Reverend Philip Riddick. He is the minister of hope and prayer for everyone on the corner of Main and Mulberry. So thank you, Mr. Riddick.
Amen. And just a slight correction, that's the house of prayer. Hoping with. Let us bless the Lord this time. Dear Heavenly Father, we honor you. We give you all honor and praise on this and every day, to God. We thank you, to God, for the food we're about to receive, to God. Please bless the hands prepared it and bless the bodies to partake of it. And make it health and strength for our bodies. This is all blessings we ask and receive in Jesus Christ's holy name. Amen.
Amen.
For the Lord is my shepherd.
Thank you. All right, the sandwiches will be served at the window. We have the order that you sent us, whether you remember it or not. And then there are additions for your sandwiches: onions, tomatoes, cheese on the table here. Your drinks are at the back if you haven't picked up tea or water yet. So if you'd like to begin. 13 is here too? All right. And that's south, isn't it? Okay. Our program today, Ms. Faile will speak at 1, but prior to that time, you still have time to visit with other people. We have an exhibit in the back that was furnished to us by Alice Ely Jones, a historian who now lives in Murfreesboro. It is a pre-Civil War maritime exhibit. She is a native of Murfreesboro. She graduated from Shaw with a degree in history. And after working as a teacher or social worker for several years, she returned to graduate school at North Carolina Central in Durham. And she's taught in the history department at NCCU and as an adjunct at Duke University. She's founded her own history and consulting business, Historically Speaking, and the Minnie Troy Publishers. She's also the author of Hertford County, North Carolina. She's a long-term member of the Murfreesboro Historical Association, a former governor appointee to the Murfreesboro Historic Commission and Preservation, North Carolina. And she requested that her honorarium today go to the Rousson Scholarship at Chowan University. Rousson, R-O-U-S-S-O-N, was a former pastor at First Baptist Church here in Winton, one of the early pastors in its history. The displays at the back are pictures of the maritime commerce of Murphy's Landing. Now, this would have also been at Winton and other places along the Chowan and Meherrin where ships would have landed. The vessels included are sterling illustrations of maritime transportation used through pre-Civil War America. And they were vital to maritime trade on the rivers in our area. The purpose of this exhibit is to enlighten present-day citizens to the glory of maritime trade and the beauty of vessels that were once so common on our waterways. And the illustrations were drawn by Michael Alston, the past director of North Carolina Maritime Museum. So please make sure you make your way back there today. We'll have plenty of time, especially after the program, for you to look at everything that's here. We have a silent auction that you're welcome to participate in. A face jug was donated by Mr. Ben Watford. Thank you, Mr. Watford. A framed picture of the old Winton Bridge is there, 1925 to 1973. And several of the ladies that I eat lunch with on Thursdays at the cafe told me that their father's fishing boat is down there at the base of the river. That was a fishing boat of Jesse Gardner, who many of us who grew up here as children remember. The pottery was donated by Jim Messer. We have a bowl, a plate, and a platter. And then a Winton on the Chowan pillow done by our videographer today, Barbara Lees. Thank you, Barbara. Let's give her a hand. We also have card sales. Our last year's Christmas cards are on sale at a discount. And we have note cards of Winton Bridge and river scenes and of the old courthouse from 1945. In singles, 4s, 8s, 12, whatever you would like to buy, we've got available there. Book sale west of the Chowan is there. Thank you to the
Historic Murfreesboro Commission.
Historic Murfreesboro Commission donated a total of 20 books to the Winton Historical Association to sell and to keep the profit for our own fundraising. So, thank you very much. We'll also have door prizes along the way. So, let's do a little bit of door prizing right now, right? Right, Maxine?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Everybody did get a ticket?
Good.
We have a number of raffles today, and to make note that all of these items were donated by businesses from Winton or by natives of Winton. So this is truly a local raffle. And we will mix these boards up good. And let's see. I'm going to just give you the last three numbers. And the first one for a gift certificate from the Corner Cafe is 682.
Oh.
Hey. Okay. Next, we have a little microwave cozy bowl holder. And this is from DGF Graphics, and I'm looking for 662.
There's a card too.
There's a clock.
It's drawn out.
From our own Ben Watford, we have a book, A Man, a Mule, and a Gun. Sounds exciting. 669. Hey. From Southern Bank, we have a lovely zippered tote. Makes me feel a little bit like Vanna White up here. And this will go to 652.
Bingo.
Nucor has provided us with a lovely cookbook, and that is for 675. Does she cook?
Yes, she does. As you can tell.
Oh, you're in trouble. My friend would say that was one sentence too much. And from the Just Hair Salon, we have a interesting looking basket here.
Basket of toiletries.
684.
He needs it for his hair.
And from Commercial Ready Mix, we have a lovely blanket. Someone may want to use that. 665.
up.
That was just to whet your appetite. There'll be more to come later.
Here's my proof.
Okay.
Oh, did you need my proof?
No, I don't. Just my husband.
Yeah. Use number
Okay.
40.
We thank all of you again for coming today. And we appreciate your being a part and a member of this organization. Your membership has enabled us to begin the process of creating a National Register Historic District. We've hired a consultant. She's done the photography, almost completed the inventory. She'll begin, she's coming in a few weeks with someone from the North Carolina Historic Preservation Office to ride through the district, to look at the houses, the territory, the additional houses that she would like to add to the original state inventory. So that process is moving forward, and we're excited to be working with her. So we appreciate your support. That enables us to support this endeavor to create a historic district that through grants and tax credits will enable people who wish to restore and renew buildings in this town so that commerce can increase, so that residences will be improved. It'll do good things for Winton and for all of us. We have 86 members now. Our corporate members are Commercial Ready Mix Products and the United Fellowship Ministry. Our charter member corporate members are C.S. Brown Regional Arts Center, the Meherrin Native American and the Meherrin Native American Church located here in Winton. We've received grants since last September totaling almost $2,500 from Southern Bank, from the people of Hertford County through the Hertford County Board of Commissioners, and through the Shepherd Alliance for Enlightenment out of Durham. Carolyn Green Boone was one of the members of Dr. Flood's entourage last year. She helped him with book sales and came to me afterwards and said, I like what you're doing for Winton, and please apply for the grant. So her group gave us money as well. So another thing for you to remember and think about is next Saturday there'll be a play about the life of Katie Hart, and that poster is up on this wall. Books Are My Children. It will be put on for the public next Saturday at 2 and 6:30. And ticket prices for adults are $10 and $5 for students. It's being put on, let's see, it will star Jill Gadsden and the students at C.S. Brown STEM High School. It's written and directed by Caroline Stevenson, produced by the Cultivator Bookstore, and through a grant of the North Carolina Arts Council. So please go ahead and see that. It's going to be a great performance. So today, let's begin with the program. Let's get started with that. I'd like to introduce Erin Faile. She's been a resident of Hertford County since 1971. She retired a few years ago after the 38 years of teaching English and history. She's recently contributed to 3 books related to Hertford County. In addition, she was a contributor to Hertford County the first 200 years, published in 1976. And it was through that article we thought this is a lady we'd like to have come to speak to our group. She's accompanied by a special friend, Pat Helwit, her husband Garth Faile, her husband of almost 54 years, her youngest daughter Leah, and Leah's husband Paul Barrett. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. I also want to thank my family who helped me put together the PowerPoint. The material I'm presenting is not original. It is based on findings of my research. It is a tremendously broad topic for a short presentation. Because of time restraints, I shall not talk about Native Americans, government, religion, or trade. Social classes had differences in their lifestyle. The majority of the settlers were farmers. My emphasis is on this group. I ask that you hold questions and discussion until the end. My agenda today is to talk about early settlers, clothing, houses, food, education, recreation, transportation, and medicine. Early settlers in Carolina migrated to the area around the Albemarle Sound. Practically all were Anglo-Saxon in heritage. 98% lived in rural areas and farmed. In 1700, the population of North Carolina was 5,000 people. Between 1700 and 1722, there was, quote, considerable influx of settlers along the Chowan and the Meharon rivers, along Wickacon, Chinkapin, and Potocacy creeks. The population of Hertford County in 1767 was 2,984 whites, 1,849 blacks, for a total of 4,833. Bath settled around 1700, and Newbern settled around 1710, were North Carolina's earliest towns. We should note that Newbern was founded by immigrants from Switzerland and Germany. Hertford County was formed from the precincts of Chowan, Bertie, and Northampton. It became a separate county effective May the 1st, 1760. Winton was established in 1766 on the land of Benjamin Wynn. Murfreesboro was established 1787 on the land of William Murphy. Contemporaries placed British Americans in three groups based on wealth and prestige. Better sort monopolized economic, social, and political leadership. They were large planters, professionals, wealthy merchants, lawyers, doctors, and clergy. Middling were the majority of the farmers, who owned 50 to 60% of the land. In 1780, the majority of North Carolina landowners had less than 400 acres. A small farmer furnished most of his own necessities and earned at least 16 pounds sterling per year in cash or credits. This amount would enable them to pay their taxes, buy a few luxury items, and save a little. Lower sort were rural and urban laborers, together with some artisans. They were usually landless and owned little property. In Hertford County in 1779, 30% of the whites were landless. 1/5 of the men were white workers. Slaves and indentured servants were supported by their masters. Specie, or coin money, was scarce. By law, productions were called enumerated commodities. All persons had to take payment of these articles at their government-rated value. Tobacco, corn, wheat, dressed hides, naval stores, that would be tar, pitch, turpentine, planks, boards, staves, shingles, pine lumber, and flax seeds were in this category. Farmers invariably became indebted to local merchants. Many debtors would move west to escape their problems. This symbolized the 19th century safety valve theory of Frederick Jackson Turner. This chart shows the annual income of Hertford County citizens in 1779, based on the British pound sterling. It's estimated that a pound sterling in 1779 would be worth $1.35 in today's money. Would you note that 50% of Hertford County's population had less than 10 pounds sterling per year? That would be equal to $13.65. 75% of the people had less than 50 pounds sterling per year. the equivalent of $67.50. Small farmers furnished most of their own necessities and earned at least 16 pounds sterling a year in cash or credits. 1/4 of the people owned no cash, stock, or debts at all. Half had less than 15 pounds sterling. Slaves and indentured servants typically had no money. Lonely frontiersmen often married early. Women married as early as 13 or 14 years of age. John Lawson, an early colonial surveyor general, remarked, "She who stays single till 20 is reckoned a stale maid." A Spanish adventurer in colonial North Carolina described the stages of marriage. The first year of marriage, the wife's role was a lover. In the second, she became a nursemaid. In the remaining years, she was a housekeeper. There were no legal provisions for divorce in North Carolina. Separation could be sanctioned by the courts. Families of 5 to 7 children were the norm. Few families, regardless of their socioeconomic level, saw their survival of all their children to adulthood. Women were responsible for the garden, dairy, poultry yard, preparing meats, pickling, preserving, nursing the sick, producing soap and candles. In 1708, John Lawson praised the women for industry and housewifery. Frequent childbirth and the hardships of frontier living caused the women to die young in comparison with the men. Many men married several times during their lifetime. A scarcity of labor required men to be versatile and jacks of all trades. Farmers made the wooden parts to their tools: plows, carts, yokes, handles. Iron parts would be made by blacksmiths. They practiced animal husbandry. William Byrd, when surveying the Virginia-North Carolina line, observed that cattle and hogs rambled in the neighboring marshes and swamps, where they maintained themselves all winter. They're not fetched home till the spring. Byrd considered this poor management. The farmer would have to fence the fields to protect the growing crops. Young boys were taught to shoot and given a rifle at age 12 or 13 to hunt for wild game. The men provided defense for their homes. They served in the local militia and were required to work on the roads. Based on tax records of the North Carolina General Assembly, in 1712, there were 800 blacks in all of North Carolina. After 1730, the number grew fast. By the end of the colonial period, 1/4 of North Carolina's population were slaves. William Tryon traveled from Wilmington to Halifax and back in 1765. In a descriptive letter of commentary, he observed, "As you penetrate in the country, few blacks are employed, merely for this simple reason: poor settlers have not more than a sufficiency to erect a log cabin for their families and procure a few tools to get a little corn into the ground." In the same letter of commentary, Tryon remarked, "Some farmers in the back countries have from 3 to 10 slaves. In comparison, the planters along the seacoast often had 50 to 250 slaves." The 1790 census shows that 72 families in Hertford County had 11 or more slaves. Large-scale production of naval stores and lumber was almost exclusively done by slave labor. Tobacco production requires intense labor. The typical farm had 5 1/2 acres of tobacco. That amount was estimated to require 2 laborers. Free black families may have owned land in Hertford County by the 1740s and 1750s. I quote Warren Miltier. By the end By the time the American Revolution had broken out, free persons of color owned 900 acres in Hertford County. When boys and girls became 6 or 7 years old, they stopped wearing baby clothes and dressed like their parents. Clothing was basically the same style as in England before the Revolution. For the poorer farmers, most clothing was homespun. There was little wool in the area, so women mixed wool and cotton for outer garments. Boats of cloth were imported. They had calico, printed linen, silk. The sleeves were generally elbow length and may have been finished with wide muslin or lace ruffles. Women generally kept their hair covered with a hat, a hood, or kerchiefs. If the weather was cooler, they added a cape or a cloak. A woman's dress would have a gown, bodice, waistcoat, and petticoat. She wore stockings, and if in town, gloves and hats. Men's breeches were often made of buckskin or lambskin. Deerskins were used for moccasins, leggings, and caps. Plains fabric was imported for clothing of slaves or poor laborers. The, quote, better masters gave a suit of coarse clothing a year, 2 rough shirts, and a pair of shoes. Some masters gave little clothing. Children often had only a shift. Jeffrey Crow, in The Black Experience in Revolutionary North Carolina, states, by all accounts, North Carolina blacks in the colonial period were ill-fed, ill-housed, and ill-clothed. Farm people often went barefoot in the summer. Hides of cattle were tanned for shoes, breeches, harnesses. Everyday shoes could be made at home or by the shoemaker of double-soled cowhides. If funds were available, shoes and hats were often purchased. The settler's first house was usually a one-room log cabin, maybe 24 feet by 18 feet with a fireplace at the end. The timbers were often later lined with hewn planks. As tar became a staple in the colony, it was used to weatherproof local dwellings. The structure might have an earthen floor and small windows. Doors and windows were hung on wooden hinges. Swinging shutters may have hung on leather or wooden hinges. Glass windows were rare for a long time. This is the Goodman Jenkins house, built in the early part of the 1700s. It exemplifies the hewn board structure favored by many settlers in Tidewater, Virginia. It's believed to be the oldest surviving structure in Hertford County. As the family became more prosperous, a hallway and other rooms would be added. The kitchen was often moved to another building. Sometimes the two structures would be connected by a covered passageway. The slave houses tended to be a simple cabin containing little furniture. The farmers may well expand their homes. However, they seldom enlarged slave houses. More slave quarters would simply be built. A Scottish lady, Janet Shaw, visited a large plantation in the lower Albemarle region between 1774 and 76. She recorded, "The owner makes a great deal of tar and turpentine. He also runs a very large sawmill. There's a show of plenty at Hunt Hill Plantation," she added. "The owners keep a good house, though it is little better than one of his slave huts." Daily life centered around the fireplace. Cooking was done indoors on the open fire. An oven may have been connected to the main fireplace. The small ships that brought immigrants had very limited cargo space. Settlers did not bring much furniture. Items such as tools, arms, ammunition, seeds, livestock, chest, andirons, kettle, iron pot, candlesticks, bed, skillet, knives, and spoons were more common. There would be one chair for the head of the family and others sat on stools. The common room may contain a table, bed, cupboard, water pail, barrels of salt, beef, spinning wheel, and maybe a loom. This table from the Albemarle region dates from 1710 to 1730. A cradle and maybe a trundle bed would provide sleeping. Older children would sleep on bags of hay in the attic. Chests were very common because they had many uses. Summer vegetables were plentiful in season. Roots and wild game could be acquired from the woods. Fish, domestic poultry were available. Smoked fish and meats could provide meat in all seasons. Cows were valued highly. They added butter, milk, and cheese. The most common meal would have had pork, cornbread, and greens. William Byrd of Virginia wrote, "These people live so much on swine's flesh, it makes them extremely hoggish in their temper, and many of them seem to grunt rather than to speak." The diet of a slave centered on corn. Little meat was given. Slaves were allowed to supplement their meager diet by hunting and fishing. They often had possum, turtles, frogs, wild birds. They could cultivate their own garden once their daily duties had been completed, and usually had free time on Sunday. A resident of Caswell County believed before 1776 that not more than 1/3 of the inhabitants could read. Scarcely half that number could write a legible hand. From 1775 to 1800, what was called a common English education, that is to read, write, and cipher as far as the rule of 3 was given, to a little more than half the inhabitants. When a child was 7, they learned the 3 R's. The women of the house were responsible for educating the family. If neighbors were close enough, the children could be sent to a woman's house for reading and writing. Most parents believed 2 years of schooling were enough. If there was no school in a town, the parents may wait for a schoolmaster to come. The parents would pay the master's salary. In January 1760, Governor Arthur Dobbs wrote to Philip Bearcroft describing, quote, "a total want of teachers and clergy in North Carolina." A liberal education belonged to the male world. Young ladies were usually satisfied with feminine accomplishments. Girls of middling folk didn't worry about feminine accomplishments. They needed housewifery skills. A lady was expected to be able to read, discuss literature, some history, to speak well, write a pretty hand, to know a little geography, to play musical instruments, and do fancy needlework. Few slaves were taught to read and write. Only 5% of Southern slaves were literate. Those who were taught trades and worked as artisans were more likely to be literate and to keep records. Visiting was the most popular form of entertainment. Women visited their neighbors and friends. They loved company and opened their doors to strangers. Men enjoyed fishing, hunting, cockfighting, gaming with cards and dice, horse racing. Dancing was popular. Before the American Revolution, the minuet was favored. After the Revolution, a faster tempo Virginia reel was favored. If no musician was available, people often sang for themselves to dance. Children helped with chores, but in their free time, they enjoyed playing with a hoop and stick, whipping a top, playing tag, blindman's bluff, London Bridge is falling down, and here we go round the mulberry bush. One traveler, speaking of colonial roads, said, "Good roads, like angels' visits, were few and far between." In the 1770s, James Shaw, a visitor from Scotland, described the roads of Carolina as poor, wretched, and miserable. Most areas only cut the trees out of the road a few feet wide. Stumps and roots were left in the road. Janet Shaw, the wife of James, observed, A man must be very poor who walks on foot. The horse was chiefly for riding, wagons were used for hauling goods, and to own a carriage was truly a mark of distinction. The average man made few journeys. He may go to the nearest inn, crossroads store, visit a neighbor, church, market, and occasionally to court. An ordinary or tavern was a place to gather news. Their accommodations were wretched. The custom prevailed to freely call at a planter's residence for lodging. There were no stagecoach lines in North Carolina until after the American Revolution. In 1789, a stage line opened between Washington and Edenton and between Edenton and Suffolk. There were few newspapers in colonial days. James Davis, father of journalism in North Carolina, began the weekly publication North Carolina Gazette from New Bern in 1751. It lasted 6 years. North Carolina went without a newspaper from 1778 to 1783. The royal governor, William Tryon, recommended that mail be opened to 4 places in the colony. The home of Matthias Brickell, present-day Union, served Hertford County beginning in 1767. The other stops were New Bern, Wilmington, and Brunswick. Very few doctors in colonial times were learned men. Many were practitioners of folk medicine. Epidemics of yellow fever, malaria, diphtheria, smallpox, scarlet fever, and influenza were common. Women of the house would usually have an herb garden for homegrown remedies. A barber was considered a surgeon. The striped pole represented red for bloodletting and white for a patient's bandage. Many sick people were purged, made to vomit, bled, filled with antimony and mercury. Both of the latter are metals. Ignorance was the greatest killer in early days. In the 18th century, the average lifespan was 36 years, largely because of infant and child mortality. I would like to summarize. The majority of the residents of this area were rural, middle-class farmers who worked the land with the help of their families. 2/3 owned some property. The landless squatted on the land and would file for a land grant or purchase it later. They had little money, but lived comfortably in a small frame house or a log cabin. They had the necessities of life, even though they did not live luxuriously. White society was mobile. A man could rise in social standing. Slaves did not enjoy the same option. They were deprived of their legal rights and often even their human dignity. They worked hard for the benefit of their masters. Our forefathers had little contact with the outside world. They were more closely tied to local government than a central government. I personally have great admiration, respect, and appreciation for those who've gone before, who labored for their families in our country. If you want more information on this subject, this is my bibliography. You don't have time to read it now. I have just a few copies if anybody wants a copy of it. I want to thank you today for the honor of speaking. Thank you. Stop with questions or discussion, but Libby told me we have just a few minutes if you have some right now. And I ask that you speak up loudly. Anybody have a question or discussion? Yes, sir.
What happened to John Lawson? There was a bridge in New Bern that bears his name.
I do not know his fate, but I would think that once, I don't know how long he was the Surveyor General, But I would think that once we had the American Revolution, we were no longer a colony. That would not be his position any longer. All right, any other questions? Y'all are very kind. Yes, sir.
You had mentioned that a lot of the indentured servants or people who was in debt moved out west to flee those debts. How did the Homestead Act of 1862 affect Hertford County area?
Oh, now, I'm not going that far west. I was thinking west of North Carolina. Western North Carolina grew very rapidly. There, I cannot even name the road, but there was a road that led toward the mountains, and many people from this area migrated to Western North Carolina. But now the Homestead Act was a great enticement for people to move west. It really was. Okay, well, I thank you.
John Lawson was killed by the Indians in 1711.
My son-in-law just Googled that, sir. John Lawson was killed by Indians in what year?
1711.
Oh, in 1711, so he never made it to the Revolution. All right, sir. Thank you, Paul.
Erin, we want to thank you for your contributions today. This is from our local graphic shop, DGF Graphics, and it's filled with discounted Christmas cards from last year. And jams, jellies, relishes from our members. There you go.
Thank you.
It's heavy.
I'm a multi-winner today.
Do you have any more questions for Erin that just popped in your mind that you'd like to ask while she's still with us?
I was.
Yes.
I was thinking about the comment that you had made concerning the young ladies at 13, 14 years old, they get married, and the boys at 13, they learn how to shoot guns.
Yes.
They weren't married in 13, 14.
Well, I think the young man being a marksman was important for turkeys, wild birds, and remember, we're still defending. Now, the question came up about Indians in the area, and I did tell Michelle I had not investigated that. I think that's a different topic. But the one comment I found on early Indian problems was a farmer by the name of John Beverly. When the farmers let their hogs and pigs wander freely, it also destroyed the Indians' corn, etc. And the Indians were quite unhappy about that.
Yes, sir.
And I ran into a comment with John Beverly being a problem, but other Indian information, I'm sorry, I don't have.
Okay, my comment concerning the girls and the boys. So would that be, so a girl at 13, 14, was she considered then a woman, while was a boy then at 13, 14? Was
I didn't see a reference to the age the young man married, but I would not think it would be quite that young, because he's starting his own farm. And the reason the acreage was 400 acres or less, that was the typical amount of a land grant. And they would settle on the land, and sometimes it took 10 years for that grant to come through for you. So meanwhile, you're squatting, and if you don't come up with the money after the land grant or enough to buy it, that's when they moved on and just skipped their creditor.
Other questions? Okay. I'd like to thank the board members who helped with this today, along with our friend Barbara Lees, who's doing all the video for us today. But Carolyn Basemore, just raise your hand, wave. She's doing our card sales. Maxine Britt, here, from our Cofield friend. Yes. That's right. Michelle Felt, well, we consider ourselves Winton, Tunis, and Cofield. Just want you to know. Michelle Felton, our secretary. Thank you, Michelle. Bud Jones, selling west of the Chowan. My name is Libby Jones, and I serve as president for this good group. Marvin Jones is absent today. He's in Iceland and could not make it to Winton. Tiffany Lewis is our vice president, and she wasn't feeling well today, so we miss her. She helped us before. Jane Newsom, there you go. And Emmy Winstead is serving as treasurer, and she was not able to be here today through other commitments. So, I'd like to remind you that we have a few lunches left. If you would like to take something home with you before you leave, just talk to Michelle. We have a few different things left, and we'd be glad to sell you those for dinner or lunch tomorrow. We have, our silent auction is ongoing. We'd like for you to have a chance to talk and meet and greet and shop for a little while. Then we'll have our door prizes. Our own fan of white will help us with that. And the end of the silent auction. So let's give everyone a chance to get up from their tables and say hello to everyone else and look around.